In this chapter, we're going to talk about psychoactive drugs and the ways in which psychoactive drugs work. Now, psychoactive drugs are drugs that alter our state of consciousness. They differ from other drugs like antibiotics that don't alter our state of consciousness. So you can see some of the different ways that our state of consciousness can be altered. All psychoactive drugs have drug effects, so those changes in our state of consciousness generally create changes in our behavior, right? When you're drunk, you can tell by looking at someone. You also can get changes that aren't as visible but that are happening, such as changes in your heart rate or your blood pressure from psychoactive drugs. And these changes occur because they are affecting the body at sites of action. And those sites of action are generally neurons in the central nervous system and primarily in the brain, although some drugs do affect neurons in the spinal cord. A drug, what you'll remember that the brain is protected by the blood-brain barrier, and so why do psychoactive drugs affect the central nervous system? And they do so because they can generally pass through the blood-brain barrier, and the more lipid soluble a drug, the more easily it passes through the blood-brain barrier. All psychoactive drugs also generally have a therapeutic effect and then a toxic effect. And so you want this margin right here between the therapeutic effect. So this is for morphine. Morphine decreases pain, but it also shuts down respiration, so it'll stop your breathing. That's the toxic effect. So you want this margin of safety between the therapeutic effect and the toxic effect to be very large. So a safer drug will have a larger margin of safety between those two things. We're going to revisit this when we talk about overdosing later on. So why do drugs vary in effectiveness? So why does morphine decrease pain better than Tylenol? And there are a variety of reasons for this. Some drugs work at different sites of action, and so some sites of action produce better effects. So if a drug works at a site of action, so if a pain drug that works in the spinal cord is going to produce more pain relief than a pain drug that's working at the level of the brain. Drugs also have different affinities for their sites of action, so they might produce more of its effect on the neurotransmitter system that it has an affinity for, and so that will also make a difference in how effective a drug is, or how addictive a drug is, depending on the type of drug you're talking about. Drugs can act as, these are all psychoactive drugs, can act as what are called antagonists, which mean they decrease the action of a neurotransmitter, or they can work as agonists, which means they increase the action of a neurotransmitter. And here are some ways that drugs can antagonize a neurotransmitter system. First of all, it can interfere with the synthesis of the neurotransmitter to start off with. It can prevent the synaptic vesicles in the terminal buttons from filling up or being released. It can block receptors on the dendrites so that the neurotransmitter cannot open them to start or stop an action potential. It can block neuromodulators. What neuromodulators do is affect neurotransmitter action in a large area, and so if you block neuromodulators, you can decrease neurotransmitter action in that large area. And then they can activate autoreceptors, and this is it's a kind of a contradictory seeming response. Autoreceptors are on neurons, and what autoreceptors primarily do is stop the neuron from continuing to produce neurotransmitter. So if you activate autoreceptors, you're going to stop that production of neurotransmitter even more. So Drugs can also serve as agonists, and here's some ways they can do that. They can release synaptic vesicles. They can directly mimic the effect of neurotransmitter. They can facilitate neuromodulators. They can block autoreceptors, which means that they are keeping that autoreceptor from decreasing neurotransmitter production, or it's counterintuitive. They can prevent enzymes from breaking down neurotransmitter. Remember, that was one of the ways to get rid of neurotransmitter in the synapse. And then they can also block reuptake of the neurotransmitter once it's in the synaptic cleft.